Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anne-Caroline Tanguy. I run marketing in France for the public sector. Call me AC, and I have with me today.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm a marketing specialist intern with AWS Social Media based here in Virginia.
And we are delighted to be your room hosts today. So before starting, just a couple of housekeeping remarks. The exit is at the end of the room. It's on the right. And please make sure that you don't stand next to it for security reasons. Take a seat and make yourself comfortable. If you want to go, just make sure that if you haven't done it yet, sorry, why don't you make sure that you downloaded the app of the event, AWS event?
Yeah, it's AWS America's event. For iOS users, you can go ahead and find it on the App Store on your phone. And for Android users, you can follow the link that's spread out throughout the venue. And the exit is at the very back towards the right, right if you're facing the back, left if you're facing the stage, and the bathroom is also the same way.
The bathrooms are outside on the right and just down the hall. And last but not least, please make sure you turn off your iPhones or put them on mute. We will have no Q&A, but 10 minutes left where you will be able to talk with our guest offline. And now I'm happy to hand it to Cam to introduce our guest.
Thank you very much. I had to turn my phone off there so I don't interrupt the session. My name is Cam Watt. I run our enterprise higher education business here in the US for AWS. And this afternoon, I'm excited to introduce John Ellis, Deputy CIO from Emory University. This morning, I had an opportunity to have breakfast with John and the CIO, and we talked a little bit about the presentation today. And my teaser, I guess, as I introduce this is I think about it in the context of the tale of two migrations. And I'll leave the plot to John to cover that during his session. There are two things I'll point out that may be helpful to the audience to think about. The first is the way in which Emory is leveraging the Cloud Adoption Framework for their migration. I think that's something that may be interesting to the audience. And secondly, deals with research. So the way in which Emory is leveraging the cloud to do research for the research community on campus and more broadly, but in a secure environment, which is extremely important. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to John. Okay?
I don't need it. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I guess I'll come up here. Not that I need to. So I'm delighted to be here, and I love coming to these conferences and hearing about lessons learned from practitioners who've tried things out. And this is one of those talks, but it's not a talk where I'm going to tell you, there are great things that we've done at Emory. I'm very excited to tell you about them, but we didn't figure everything out. I have lessons learned, but some of them are lessons learned, maybe what not to do rather than what to do. And it's that kind of thing. So I'm excited to tell you about our journey and a couple of projects that we worked on, and we've organized ourselves in a couple of different ways. And I have some key takeaways at the end about that. So some of you may not know about Emory University. It's in Atlanta. You might be surprised that we have twice as many employees as students. That is because we're an academic medical center, and we include hospitals. So it's quite a large organization. What this means is that when it comes to the IT, this is a kind of our starting point, how the business is organized, and our cloud journey has got to take this into account. We do have one enterprise CIO over all of healthcare and university IT. University IT supports a lot of the enterprise applications, the HR, financials, email, wireless, data, voice, all the networks, data centers, storage for the enterprise. That's healthcare as well. But on top of that, you have domain-specific application support teams. So I don't support directly the electronic medical record. There's a whole other team that does that, right? So most of our cloud journey until recently has involved software as a service. Talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Just last October, we moved our medical record to a hosted platform. University IT typically goes first, so that's what we've been doing these past few years is University IT has been kind of blazing the trail. And healthcare is going to be not far behind, but what this means is that we really don't have a burning platform to move out of our data centers. I mean, it's kind of smoldering. I'll tell you why in a second. But, you know, even if we moved all the university IT assets out of the data centers, healthcare would still be there for some time. The reason it's kind of smoldering is that we don't have, until recently when the medical record moved to a hosted platform, of course we're on Office 365, so we have that, but a lot of our assets are in the Atlanta region. We have a primary data center on main campus and a secondary data center really not that far away. So that's a high risk and we need to do something about that. Other values that really resonate with us, you know, innovation, agility, ease of use. I'm sure these are familiar to many of you, and there's not much difference there. Overarching all of this for us, since we are an academic medical center involving hospitals, of course, is security. That's not too bad of an eye test. There were a lot of years I wanted to include. You can see we started in 2012. We actually developed our first cloud roadmap and CCOE, but this was really led at the director level. At that time, actually, I moved into the Deputy CIO role in 2014, so I was a director along with some of my colleagues, and we were really pushing, let's go to the cloud. But at that time, you really couldn't get a BAA signed, right? We needed a business associates agreement, right? You know, those were the early days. It was even hard to do it with software as a service providers, right? So we kind of disbanded that early effort, and in 2016 is when the enterprise CIO we decided, and we were all together on, let's do something for the research community. Part of the reason for that is that they were going to do things in the cloud, whether we had policy about it or not. And we had some use cases where they were doing things and things did get exposed, right? So that was a big risk. So we wanted to work on that. So AWS at Emory is what we call that project for researchers, and that's on the bottom half of the timeline. The top half is our migration effort. And I'll get a little bit more into this, but we have been helped. We couldn't do this on our own. We had an AWS resident architect for a whole year as we tried to figure out how to do this framework for researchers. AWS with Smartronics helped us with a migration readiness assessment for the migration project. And we're still in the migration readiness planning effort with Smartronics. It's going well. All this is going well. This is great. There are some lessons learned here I'll get to in a second. So first, on the separate team approach, we have about $750 million in sponsored research as of last year. And these are the main areas in research programs where we do a lot of our research. The problem we're trying to solve is, you know, we don't want people to shoot themselves in the foot, basically. There's little understanding of the shared responsibility model. There's a lot of power in these tools. A researcher just wants to get the research done, or a clinician that may want to set up a new scheduling app for their clinic. They just want to get things done. And so it's very easy for them to adopt these clouds platforms with poor practices and bad results. So what we want to do is prevent that and somehow to mediate access to AWS for our research community. We chose AWS because most of them were using AWS at the time. There's still people that want to use the other cloud platforms, but and AWS, of course, was market leader. So we made a strategic decision to develop this framework in AWS. The key bullet here is the last one. All right, it's not what it's easy to do, it's what do we need to do. And when we started this and we started saying what we needed to do to make this happen, I was one of the skeptics. I didn't think we were going to be able to do it. I mean, it was gargantuan to what we were going to do. We had concerns, obviously, but the controls we wanted to put in place to address those concerns. And I'm going to just go over a couple of the bullets here, just give you a flavor of that scope and how gargantuan the project seemed. We needed to do a service risk assessment for every AWS service. And of course, we were in this planning process for a couple of years. And AWS releases 30 plus services every year. So that's more security risk assessments we needed to do. A lot of effort. For every one of those services, we had to decide, do we leave it on? Is it okay? Do we need to block it? Or do we need to have some kind of mitigation or control put in place? For those things, for each of those things, we need to make sure that if we wanted it off, it stayed off. And if we had a mitigation, that we were able to set up risk detectors to detect if somebody opened an S3 bucket, that's the easiest one, to the internet, and remediate it automatically. That was the goal. That's what we needed to do. So I'm happy to say that just this past Monday, 2 days ago, we are now generally available for our research community and others who want to use it at Emory. We've had 12, 15 groups doing pilots and proof of concepts for us, so we know it works well for them. You can go to aws.emory.edu, and I would encourage you to go under the documentation section and run the demo. We have a video that kind of explains it all, but there's a lot of information available without authentication out here on the site, primarily because we want help to keep this going. We've invested a lot of time and effort in building this framework, and just to keep up with AWS is hard enough, but if you want to extend this framework to the other cloud platforms, and we know I can't control what my researchers want to use. Some of them want to use Google, they want to use Azure, right? They're not all going to want to use AWS. So we need to extend this same approach to the other platforms. We can't do that by ourselves. So we've developed and created a foundation, nonprofit. I think the first official board meeting is next week. We've had an opening meeting. But you can see there are 15 groups. There are 7 corporate folks involved and about 8 universities right now. The list is growing. AWS, Smartronix are involved, Google, Microsoft, and others. And it's just getting going. We've got a lot of interest in it, but we're going to need help to make this a success. To get there, and this is, let me just emphasize this. This was fantastic achievement, and we have done it. I'm going to give you some of the things we might have wanted to do differently but couldn't, and maybe some of the friction that happened. We've gotten through all that. It's all good now, but I did want you to know that if you go with the separate team approach like we did, we felt that you had to start with, get the best experts you can find on campus or what money could buy, put them in a room and let them figure this out, because nobody had worked on this kind of problem before. We had an AWS resident architect, as I said, for a year, and he loved it because he was not getting these kinds of questions and problems from other customers. So he was able to cut his teeth on new stuff. But I would look around the room when I have the $3 signs for that first bullet, because I would look around the room at the people in the meeting, and I would just add up the salaries. I would want to be in the meeting. The CISO would want to be in the meeting. It was very expensive. We did try a rotation method, and for those who could go through for training, for those who could go through that, it was very effective. I don't know about you, but at Emory, we don't typically have the funding to completely backfill whole teams, right? So people are doing these projects, they got maybe 20%, maybe 30% capacity over their operational work, so it's not a dedicated team. And so what that meant was we really couldn't make use of the rotation as much as we want, so it didn't really spread. It was more like, a dozen or so people getting trained rather than, 30, 40, 50 people getting trained. Operational support teams, once we kind of figured out the design, they were it was a bit reactive when we needed them because they weren't involved in all those other discussions, so they were kind of catching up. We ended up with a couple of projects, sub-projects, different tools, we were trying to move fast and be innovative. And so overall, there's some pros and cons to that approach, and if you're thinking about using it, you might want to see if there's a way for you, if you want to use this approach, to mitigate some of these. I do think if you're doing something really innovative, it might be the way to go. It's really hard. You do probably need to get a bunch of experts around to figure something out for you. If it's speed, that may not be required. As I said, for those who participated and were trained, it was very effective. But some of the cons, leaders involved as much as contributors. And what the problem with that is that, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute, that if I'm in the room with individual contributors and we're at a whiteboard, and I may say, and I'm pretty nice, I'm not a mean person. So I think maybe we should do this. And they'll just defer to me, just because of my position, even though I don't want them to just defer, right? And if you're a very strong technical person, you can really overpower people. Come back to this a little bit later. So the last bullet, if you're going to bring this back in-house and not go to a managed service approach or outsource it, you know, the operations eventually is going to have to catch up. And that, when you're thinking about the whole project timeline, there's that design part, but you also have to take into account bringing it into operations. I mean, that's part of it too, even though you might say, oh, I'm done. No, you're not done until you brought it into operations, right? It's sort of like when you blast off in a rocket ship and, you know, escape the atmosphere and coming back in, you got a lot of friction coming back in if you go that high. That's sort of the analogy I'm going for there. So that's AWS at Emory. We used more or less a separate team approach for that. Now I want to move to and transition to the grow your team approach. And for this one, as has been mentioned, we use the Cloud Adoption Framework from AWS. Overall, for our migration program, we had, you know, objectives that were similar that you saw in the beginning, but the principles were really transformational, especially the last two on the right. So prefer automation and infrastructure as code over manual builds, okay? We weren't doing that, you know, because that was going to require change. We weren't really skilled to do that, and so that's going to require change. Transparency for everyone. We wanted to share work, code, configurations, no silos. We want to be able to see it. So we want the engineers to be able to see what the firewall rules are, so when a problem happens, they can troubleshoot, right? I mean, it's like, that's hard sometimes to get that visibility, right? So read-only for everyone. And so that was really going to be transformational for us. So to build the case, we started the project in June of 2017. And that fall, I went to Gartner conference. I talked to other people in higher ed community. There are a lot of folks that have gone ahead of us and kind of blazed a trail in the higher ed community. And some of them used kind of a separate team approach. Some of them, you know, kind of grow your own approach. So I've been talking to folks about that, but I attended the Gartner Symposium, learned a lot there. Also AWS reInvent, I did go once to AWS reInvent. Enjoyed that, but that's where I believe it might have been where it was really announced, the competency program, migration competency program, and cloud adoption. It might have been before that, but there was a keynote on that. I said, aha, that's what I need to do. So I wanted to go back and sell this, you know, to my colleagues. And so key selling point was, do we just want to migrate workloads, or do we want to migrate the organization, all right? If we want to migrate workloads, we can get checkbox, we're in the cloud, but we have all these folks that haven't come along with us. Maybe we end up just going to a managed services play, and that's always kind of been in the back of my mind. That's an option for us to do a managed services approach, but we decided no, we did not want to do that. We wanted to grow the team and bring the organization along. So, like I said, we needed some help, so this is our migration readiness assessment. A lot of red, a lot of yellow, right? That's what our organization looked like. We've been busy over the last, well, since that, it's been about, what, 18 months, close to 18 months since we did that. Most of this is flipped now to green. I mean, we still have some yellow, but we've made a lot of progress. A couple things about this. It's what I like about this framework. You know, typically when you think about a migration effort, you say it's a technical effort that you've got to go through. In fact, the first 3-4 months of our project, of our planning project, was really non-technical, and it was driving the team crazy. They had to document everything. They hate documenting. They had to document everything. They had to work on their processes and procedures. We had to organize ourselves around training. How were we going to do that? What were we going to require? We had to really flesh out a business case. You know, why are we doing this exactly? You know, what are our goals? All of this other stuff. I mean, there's a lot of technical up there, but there's a lot of non-technical there as well that you need to address. And that's why I like, because if you do flip everything to green, you feel pretty sure you've really brought your organization along with you. When I say that, it's not just the technical teams too. You got to figure out accounting and billing and all that. So you've got your finance people brought into it, right? So really, really a good a good approach. But I had a challenge. The way we did the previous project, we had experts engaged in every step of the way for the whiteboard sessions, working on everything, and I knew that we really needed to somehow get them out of the way so, you know, the individual contributors could learn, right? And I say this comes from a little story about, and where this became clear to me, why it's important to give people space, and you'll be surprised at what they can come up with, right? Give them space, let them grow a little bit, let them beat their head against the wall a little bit without an expert coming in to help them. I was in an organizational training group, experiential learning thing, and we had these, I think they were 3x3 puzzle pieces. And the instructor just threw them out, and we were supposed to organize all those puzzle pieces and tell the story, right? And that was our assignment. So some of us, you know, were like, okay, let's organize. You know, here's your role, you do that. We're doing the project management thing. Some people were actually engineers, you know, we're kind of figuring out how the pieces fit together and all that. We got them all laid out. But there was somebody on our team over on the side had just whispered, I think it's this, you know, really low. We didn't hear them. We kept going, you know, doing our thing. They said it a little bit louder, and at that point, the instructor just said, stop, and allowed this person to speak so we all could hear it, and they just had the whole vision of the puzzle right there. We would have spent another 30 minutes, you know, but this person had it, right? So that message really stuck with me, and I do see in meetings where I'm there, other high-power folks are there trying to work things out, that you don't get the participation of some folks that could really add value to your organization. So I wanted them to also grow into engineers themselves. So I'm not saying I want every individual contributor to be an architect so we have, you know, 200 different architectures. That's not the point. But they need to think like one. Give you an example, outside of cloud migration, we did a border upgrade for our network and got a great network architect. And they had not, you know, the intention was that they were going to have all the documentation done, a handoff done before the go live, but it didn't happen that way. They were a little bit behind, so they went live, ran into an issue. The support teams tried to solve it, but they couldn't do it. They had to call the architect in. Because, you know, if you're troubleshooting an operational issue, if you don't know how the pieces are put together, just following the documentation will only get you so far. You kind of need to know a little bit more about it and have a feel for it. So I wanted people to think like engineers and architects, all right? It's really hard because, I mean, it's hard for me too because I wanted to be part of the project myself. And my colleagues did too, so I'm kind of stiff-arming my colleagues, and that was hard to do. And they were doubtful. They didn't think this was going to work. So what we ended up coming up with was we have a cloud advisory group, which is our center of excellence. You can see it's about roughly half and half managers and individual contributors. And then we kind of stuck to the side, all the rest of us in a review board, all right? And this is how this works. Here's a project structure view of it. And the work streams, you have product owners of the work stream. You can see in that long horizontal middle section, you got business case, application portfolio, landing zone. Have one manager leading a work stream, the rest are individual contributors. And we've got the story owner will think they've completed the story, they'll have guidance, they'll get reviewed by our SME, which in this case, Smartronix was acting as a SME for us. And another way to look at it, this is kind of the process. Once it's reviewed by Smartronix, the story goes to its complete status, it's ready for the product owner of that work stream to accept the story if it meets the acceptance criteria. Now, sometimes we'll have these stories that end up being big milestones, like something related to, you know, account management, landing zone design, or a big, what you call architecture milestone, right? Well, these would run through the Cloud Advisory Group, and if needed, they would go to the review board, where we could get in there and actually ask questions and all that. And then it might go to our Cloud Steering Committee, all right? So the important part of this was, though, we kept those reviews and approvals outside of the sprints. They were like separate, so it didn't interrupt the flow, right? We also needed to be real pragmatic and adjust as we went. And the key thing, if whoever you're getting to help you with this, be sure that you listen to your team and give that feedback back and have regular communications with them so you can adjust. So at first, the whole goal was, let's let the staff do the work and keep Smartronix out of it as much as possible. They were going to be the guardrails, and we were going to do everything. But that was a little bit too much Emory and not enough help. And people were floundering. I was getting complaints from people, I don't know what I'm doing in this project, and so on. So we said, okay, seed the backlog, do some stories, help them out a little bit more. So we raised the level of involvement. I thought that was key. It really brought the project back on track. We've had to make a couple of course corrections throughout the engagement. That's been really a valuable thing to do. So here's where we are. We are in the middle of Sprint 19. So that's 2-week sprints. When we started with if you look at the Cloud Adoption Framework, and it's on Amazon's website, they'll typically say migration readiness planning takes between 8 to 12 sprints. Right? And you can do it that way, but if you've got project team members that have operational work or day jobs, they're doing it 20% of the time, it's going to take longer. And we're not yet done. I think we should be done. I'm hoping, depending on what happened in the meeting this morning, we have some key decisions to make. I'm hoping it'll be within 24 sprints. We'll be done. All right. So, let me go back. One other point on this one. You can see security and compliance. These are stories, by the way. This is a story count, not a point count. This is the number of stories in the project. A lot of the stories are pretty much complete. We still have work to do in the operating model, landing zone, and security and compliance. Okay. So here's some of the hidden gems or surprises I wanted to share with you. All right. So look for and expect to find talent that was otherwise hidden. All right. You'll be very surprised. So I'll give you a couple of examples. There was a system engineer that I hired several years ago, and was hired onto my team. And we were a little concerned because they came from Windows administration, and we were going to put them on the Linux team, right? So it's going to be a learning curve. They were going to be helping to run the web hosting infrastructure, okay? And so they came in, they started. We had an issue, the web hosting. The previous system engineer went on to be a security analyst, but he's one of those engineers that his bash shell was VI. He could do the history, it was just like fast typing. It was reassuring when he was at the keyboard. And this new person came in, and we had an issue, and they were like, point, just point. And I had hair back then. It drove me crazy. I said, can't you get a tutor, typing tutor program or something? Anyway, we worked with him on that, and he's one of the ones, I never would have thought this, he's one of the ones that got migration experience by migrating, in a proof of concept, our web hosting environment into AWS using Ansible playbooks and Python scripting and the whole 9 yards. So he can do it. And I think there's a danger, especially folks in leadership positions, to form an opinion of someone based on other experience, and just not think that they're going to be able to do it. This is very transformational work. Another example, we had a system engineer who's been struggling, had them on a performance improvement plan. They started getting involved in this project, and it turns out I think they really are a software engineer, at heart. And now they're just kicking it. I mean, they really are just knocking it out of the park, doing Python coding, Ansible playbooks, and loving it, right? You never know what's going to happen. So I'd encourage you to just be on the watch for that, and don't just make assumptions that people aren't able to do it, because they can do it. The other one is that high morale and excitement is contagious. So if you let folks really get involved and engaged and they feel like they have ownership, like they're running the show. They're not being told how to do something. They're out there, on the whiteboards, doing it, figuring it out. It really is kind of exhilarating for them. They get a lot of excitement. They take that back to their team, and they get excited. And then I have people saying, how do I get involved in this project? How do I do it? That's been really good. The Cloud Advisory Group, or that's what we call our CCOE, they actually are good communicators. I mean, CCOE is supposed to handle your communication, and they've been writing newsletters on our newsletter site and giving presentations, and that was a surprise to me. They've done a really good job doing that. And the last one is really one that is probably most surprising to some of my colleagues. In the beginning, the objection I had was, look, John, what's going to happen is they're going to bring things to the review board. We're not going to like it. We're going to have to go back and do it ourselves and get on the whiteboard. And so you're just wasting time, right? Well, it turned out so far that hasn't been the case. Most of the time, we've endorsed what they've said. Now, we have sent some things back for feedback, additional review, but they've been able to do it. So that was a really positive surprise. Now, some of the key takeaways, innovative, groundbreaking initiatives may require a separate team approach, so keep that in mind. I'm not sure about that. If you have experience with that, I'd love to hear about that. If it's speed you want, remember the tortoise and hare, because as I say, you've got to take into account, if you're bringing it back into operations, you've got to take into account that whole project life cycle. Have faith in your existing teams. They can do this if you stay flexible, you provide the guidance when needed, stay out of the way when needed. They can do it. Another point about that, just to emphasize, since we're in a conference where I think all of us are probably competing for talent, right? So there was in Teresa Carlson's keynote, I think this was right, she said there was 100,000 job shortage, right? That's a lot. There's no way we're all going to be able to compete for the same talent, and we're going to need to grow it. We need to figure out a way to grow the talent in our organizations. It's just not going to be sustainable. Plus, Emory can't pay what Amazon pays. And there is a story there, which is good. One of my staff is now a technical account manager at Amazon. I'm fine with that. It's good. Just don't take them all. But it's been good. And I want them to be able to grow, right? I want them to be able to do that. But they were able to go through all of the training, all the professional certificates, and they have prior experience as a TAM before, so it was a perfect fit. I just hope I don't lose too many of those. But if you do lose folks, it's a great opportunity. We hired an early career security analyst fairly recently, and that's worked out great. I mean, didn't have a lot of experience, but boy, the energy was great, and has come in and really taken off. In fact, that person is leading one of the work streams, so great for them too. And at the beginning, they were really hesitant about wanting to do that, take that role. They were somewhat shy. The other is the journeys should be measured in years, not months. At least that's been our experience. Leadership buy-in, patience is critical, and Cam mentioned we had breakfast with my boss this morning, and I'm always checking in with him. Are you okay with this? The issue we were dealing with today may delay the project a little bit further. But he's been very good about we need to do what we need to do, right? Not what's easy to do. Let's do it. Let's do it the right way. So that's been fabulous. And then commit. I'd encourage you to commit to organizational transformation, not checkbox migrations, if possible, if you're allowed to do that. And with that, thank you. So as we said in the beginning, if you've got questions, we're happy to answer those up here. Smartronix is up here. We have AWS up here. Just come on up and we'll gather on this side and be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.